Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with the Latina perspective. Welcome as we continue with season 12 with a focus on women's health. It's going to be a great season, so let's get into it. Ana Lopez is a bilingual sexologist and sex coach and founder of In Spanglish. She is here to help Latinas heal from the cultural conditioning that's held them back and reconnect with their pleasure, a su manera. She believes your pleasure matters. Sex should be about you, what you want, what you need, and what actually feels good without guilt, fear, or outdated beliefs holding you back. No more shame, no more silence, just real, empowering, culturally relevant sex ed that lets you enjoy sex sin vergüenza. Let's get into it. Hey, today I am so excited to be speaking with Ana Lopez. We have been trying to have her on the podcast for a long time. And so I am so glad and thankful that it is finally happening this season. We had her as a panelist for the Fuerte and Fearless panel last month. And so I'm so excited to bring her on for her own episode. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been so long. I'm so excited that we're finally doing this. It's been a long time coming. My name is Ana Lopez. I am a sexologist, sex coach, and consultant, and I'm also the owner of In Spanglish, which is my sex coaching business, where I help Latinas to really overcome all the shame and awkwardness they feel about sex and sexuality and help them to enjoy mind-blowing sex on demand.
I love that bio. It is punchy, spicy, and straightforward, which is something that really drew me to you the first time I met you and heard you speak, is that a lot of times I remember talking about sex and being ashamed or scared to talk about it. And I was just empowered by the openness and vulnerability that you brought to the table when talking about sex. And I was just oh, it doesn't have to be this thing that we're scared of or trying to skirt around these topics. Let's just talk about it. And I think that's what I appreciate about you, that it's just so easy to talk about and it's not embarrassing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's my goal. So thank you. I appreciate that. That's how it's coming up. I'm super excited to hear that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have grown up in this kind of purity culture where whether you've been raised in a Christian household or a Catholic household, sex is just not talked about. And the more I'm learning, especially as I get older, it's not just about sex, the act of sex. It is so important for us to understand our bodies and what is happening within our bodies, especially all of our reproductive organs. So I'm wondering, what got you started in this profession?
Yeah, I love when people ask me this question because I swear it sounds fake. But I have always wanted to be a sex education teacher. I love education. I'm a coach technically, right? But there is some education in there. And I've always loved just teaching and education in general. And so the very first memory that I have of teaching, if you will, about sex is I had these little neighbors across the street. I was 5, by the way, which is why it sounds fake. But I remember talking to them about sex. I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but my best guess is that I was just telling them what I overheard my older brother, who's 8 years older than me, saying. So I was basically involved in things that conversations that I shouldn't have been involved in, probably. I was just eavesdropping more than likely. But I do remember having that conversation and I was just I always wanted to be a teacher. And I specifically wanted to talk about sex and sexuality. And oftentimes when I say that, people are oh, you were just interested in sex. When we think of sex as adults, right? And I was no, really, I'm a sex nerd in the sense of I want to know all the things, what turns people on, what turns people off. I'm super just in general, not just the act of sex. And so that's kind of where that seed kind of like was planted, and that I was just like, oh, I really like this and I want to be a teacher. So I spent all of elementary, junior high, like, I want to be a teacher. I remember having a list of like, I would take notes on my teachers of like, I will do this, I will not do this. Like, I had this like list that I would carry around with me. And then I got to high school and I was like, absolutely not. We are not being a teacher. No. So I went into college, decided to go into psychology because that's what you do when you're not sure what you want to do. So I went into psychology and I had a professor tell me, hey, you can go into sex therapy. And I was like, sold. Let's do this. So once I graduated with my bachelor's, I went into a program where they basically train you to be a social worker, to eventually become a licensed clinical social worker to provide therapy. But they also train you in sex education so that you're trained to be a sex therapist specifically. But as I was going through the program, I realized a lot of the red tape that's around therapy itself. And therapy is great. I'm in therapy myself. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. But the way that it was kind of created, like, it's not created for Latinas, who is specifically the demographic that like I desire to work with and who I work with. And I realized that it just wasn't created for us. And the way that I want to interact with my clients and things like that is seen as like unethical and inappropriate, when in reality, that's how I connect with them. That's how I'm able to, bring them in and have them open up and talk to me. And so I was like, if I'm going to have my own practice, I don't want people telling me what's ethical and what's not when they know absolutely nothing about my culture and my clients. Um, so I went ahead and completed my degree and became a social worker, but I decided that therapy was not the route for me. I also didn't want to diagnose people. And so I decided to become a coach instead. And so, I am able to create my own ethics, if you will, while working in a way that works for me and for the best of my clients.
That is amazing. I think I'm a big proponent of therapy as well, but I have noticed the many hoops that one needs to go through in order to get to that end point. And so I totally understand, especially in the type of work that you're talking about. Like, yeah, I I can definitely see um like your choice in choosing like the coach route instead of like therapy. Um so yeah. So how has it been since like starting your business? Because I think back to one of the first panel discussions that we had. I think it was the beginning of this year or maybe last year. And the questions were nonstop. I remember I didn't even have to like go through my list of questions because people were just so curious and like wanting to talk about it. So like how was that start of your business? Like did you see like okay, from the first time you put it out there, like you were just growing, or was there some hesitation in people being okay like talking about this?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. So I always say I got bored during the pandemic and started a business. Like, my goal was to start a business eventually. And I was literally just bored during the pandemic and like, let me see what this LLC is about. And then I opened and I was like, oh, well, I guess I should just announce it because I just filed for an LLC. And so that's kind of how it happened. In terms of like the legalities, if you will, of opening the business. So I remember announcing it. And at that time, it was really just people that knew me. Like, there wasn't really anybody else outside of that. I started on Instagram, and a lot of people were asking me questions. I could tell though that there was some like timidness or like reservation in asking the question, because these are people that knew me semi intimately, at least like in person, right? And so I could tell that there was some kind of like hesitation and reservation there, but I could also tell that the desire for that knowledge was there. And they were like, oh, this is a space to ask questions. People that I would have never thought would have like asked me those questions were beginning to ask like, oh, this is a place where I can ask questions. And they weren't even necessarily like people that I would work with. They were just people that I knew that were like, oh, this is a space where I can ask this question. This conversation is being had. Like, this is the perfect opportunity to do so. And that's kind of how it's just kept going with people that I know, people that I don't know, right? It's like once they notice that that is available and I'm open and available to talk about it, then they are more ready to like ask the question. It's kind of like I think people already have those questions in mind. Or at the very least, it's not a specific question, but they're like, I'm thinking about this thing. I don't really know what the question is, but I want to share this with someone, but I don't have the place to share that. And I think me being that space and like, whether it's in person or online and really having that place, it's like a safe place for them to land to actually share that information and ask those questions that haven't been answered.
And I think that's how a lot of these conversations kind of snowball. Like it's just one person putting it out there and opening the space for having conversations. And then it takes the courage of like one person to chime in. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I can relate to that. And I can relate to this. And let me offer like this experience. And then that's when the conversation starts. And then it kind of just snowballs from there. Which is great. I think, especially this topic. I'm finding a lot of women that are millennials, like in that 35 to 45 and beyond range. Like, we just don't have the knowledge of like our own sexual pleasure. We don't have the knowledge of what is going on internally as we age, what happens after we might have kids. Like all of that is part of just understanding our bodies in general. And so how in your business have you been able to like talk through some of this stuff? And especially in your coaching, like what are some of the number one topics that people are curious about or come to you for advice?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to start by saying that I always tell my clients that even, of course, I want them to have amazing sex. Like, yes, that is like the goal, right? And I always tell them that this is more than just sex. This is more than just orgasms and the act of sex and all of that. If you never have sex again, it is vital for you to understand your body and how it functions. And that includes pleasure, even though like, yes, we're talking about sexual pleasure, but pleasure outside of that, because we do experience pleasure outside of sex. I just think that oftentimes when we say pleasure, we immediately go to sex for whatever reason. And so it is vital that you understand your body and its functions, because that's how you advocate for yourself. That's how you advocate for your children. That's how you advocate for your spouse, your partner, what have you. It is super important that we understand our bodies, and specifically our very own bodies, the bodies that we are in, right? Because we are supposed to be the professional in our body. We are the only one that's in our body 24/7. And I think particularly in Latino culture, it is very common of like, and we see this everywhere as well, but it's very much like white coat syndrome, right? Like someone is in a white coat, we automatically trust them. And like, great. I think there's something to be said about trusting your medical providers. And that said, they are the professional in the science realm. You are the professional in your own body because you experience it 24/7. The doctor is only getting a snapshot of what you are, like a part of your day, a part of your experience, right? And in the same way, when I work with my clients, like they are the professional in their body and their own lived experience. I can provide my professional expertise and my professional eye on what it is that they are telling me. But I can only help you as much as you tell me, right? And so it really starts out by opening those conversations and getting my clients curious about their bodies and about how they function so that I can better help them, because I can give them information all day. But if I'm being fed half information, whether it's intentional or unintentional, or it's misinformation, whether that's intentional or unintentional, then the help that I provide isn't going to be that helpful. And so we typically begin working together by talking about like, okay, what are your main issues? And I'll get into like what are the most common ones in just a second. But we really talk about like, what is the most pressing thing going on for you right now that you want to solve, and talking about like, where are you at as a person in the season of your life? What do you got going on outside of the sex, like outside of the bedroom, right? Outside of sex, what is going on for you physically? How well do you know your body? And how can we begin to create that awareness around your body and stress responses and all of those things? Because that is what is contributing to the issue that you're currently experiencing, right? It's not just about like, well, do this position and then you're like good to go. It's really about like, how can we incorporate you as a person, you as a whole being, to solve this issue that you are experiencing that just so happens to be about sex. And then in terms of the most common issues or complaints, I would say like uneven libido is one of them. So whether they're like, really, they're like, yeah, I want to have sex all the time and my partner doesn't, or vice versa, right? And really working to not necessarily even that out, but get them to a level of libido where they feel comfortable, right? Oftentimes, I see women trying to either like be like, well, I want to get my partner to like the level of libido that I'm at. I want them to like have a really, really high sex drive. Or I have no sex drive and I, want to get to the level that my partner's at. But for me, it's as their coach, it's really about getting them to like, how many times a week do you want to be having sex? What do you want your libido to be at? And what are the things that are contributing to this low libido, right? Or the libido that you are not comfortable with necessarily. I don't even like calling it low, because at what point are we defining it low, right? So it's like, if you don't like where your libido is at, how do we fix that? I would say the second most common thing would probably be like, I want this thing to happen, or this thing is happening in the bedroom and I don't like it, and I can't get my partner to show up differently. And so we work a lot about identifying what are your deepest sexual desires? Like, is it really that you want more kissing, or do you want more connection, right? Because those are two different conversations. And how can we work together to find a way to talk to your partner about that, specifically if you're feeling awkward and embarrassed? It is very, very common, and I find this amongst everybody, sex professionals alike. It can be really awkward to talk to your partner about sex, even though you have sex with them. It's a lot easier to talk to your comadres and, maybe even a cousin or like whoever, about sex than the person that you're like actually having sex with. That is super common. So I want to normalize that. But really thinking about what is most comfortable for you and how can we incorporate that. I don't think we have to like rewrite the whole thing, right? I think we can use what we have. What are you comfortable with? How are you comfortable initiating? How are you comfortable having conversations? And how can we incorporate what's already working into having those conversations?
You are so right. Like, I am like so quick to chat with my girls about what is going on, how I'm feeling. Like, do you know he did this? And I want this. And when I get in front of my partner, I'm just like, hello, hi, we're good, you're good. All right, let's
How's your
do this.
day?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so true. And I think that the more we normalize it and just like include it in conversation, or just like schedule a time um, when we're not like being intimate to have those
Hmm.
conversations. I think that was one of the things that you advised on during our panel,
Yeah.
was like, have these conversations with the clothes on. Like, right before you're about to have sex is not the time to bring up all of these
Yeah.
things, because there's just so much emotion
Right.
tied into it, and vulnerability and feelings tied into it. So I love that. And talking about how your libido can fluctuate um, is something that I did not expect as I aged. And like I feel like my libido when I was in my 20s is so different now that I am getting closer to 40. And that is something that has been hard to grapple with and hard to talk about with my partner,
Hmm.
because there's so much feeling and emotion tied into it. And it's something that I can't necessarily explain, or like I don't understand fully like how to communicate like about any of this. I'm just like, you know what, I it's not that I don't desire you, it's just that I am exhausted. Like, I am so tired with everything that I have to do. And I think as I'm learning more, like, there's so much that happens internally that can affect libido. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, if like listeners are not really aware of how like our choices in what we're putting into our body with like nutrition, exercise can actually affect our libido, and like what chemicals, what is going on
Yeah.
inside that we're not taking, like we don't have to feel like personal, like, oh, maybe it's just me. And like, yeah, can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah, totally. So it's very common nowadays to be like, get your hormones checked. And like, that's great because for a really long time, we weren't doing so. That said, and we talked about this on the panel, so I'm sure it'll be like on the episode as well to revisit that. But when you get your hormones checked, it's only a part of the picture and it's only really a snapshot. So it can only tell you so much. And that snapshot is only as good as the provider that you see. So is your provider going to be like, okay, this is today's snapshot in like 2 weeks or at another point in your cycle? Are we going to be taking another snapshot? And like, do they know what to do with that information? Or are we getting blood work done just to get blood work done? And like I mentioned on the panel, like as someone who grew up without insurance and is like, now I have insurance and I want to go get all the things tested, I understand that desire, and getting, physicals and blood work done and all the things has its place. But if you don't know what to do with that information, you're not really going to get anywhere. And there are a lot of things that we can do prior to all of that medical testing that doesn't require a ton of time and energy and money, resources in terms of like insurance and, doctor's visits and like all of the things. And so I was telling my clients, like, when is the last time you had a drink of water, right? Like, I don't even know what the percentage is. I should probably look it up. But like, there's like, how many of us are dehydrated, right? And it's like chronic dehydration. This isn't just like oh, just today I didn't drink a ton of water. Like, it has a cumulative effect. And so if you are not regularly hydrated, then your body is going to become dry, and that includes your vulva. And so when you are dry, you're naturally not going to want to have sex, both consciously and unconsciously, right? Like, you don't have the means for lubrication, which is typically an indication that you're prepared for sex. So you just naturally don't want to have sex. It also, dehydration causes brain fog. So if you're not cognitively like functioning at your best, you're not going to be getting things done in the time frame that they need to be getting done. And therefore you have like no time for sex. It's like the last thing on your mind, which is what I hear all the time. Or you're having sex and then your brain's like, well, what's for dinner? And oh my God, did I take the dishes out of the dishwasher? And like all of those other things, which is also very normal, independent of like hydration status, but it contributes to it, right? Like, if you are feeling like you're not at your best when you're having sex, your brain tends to like stay stuck in there. There's also the socialization piece around like work before play type of deal. And so it's like, if we feel like we haven't got the things done that like quote unquote need to be done, then when we have sex, it's like, I shouldn't be having sex. I shouldn't be enjoying this. It's like almost like the subconscious, like self-sabotage or like punishment, if you will, because it's like, well, I haven't earned this. And like, that's a whole other discussion, right? Like, we don't need to earn pleasure, but because that's a lot of what women are going around thinking because of socialization, particularly Latinas, then it just kind of ends up happening by default. Another thing is like sleep, right? Like, I understand that it's not always like our fault. Sleep can be impacted by a multitude of things. But if you're forcing yourself to stay awake or forcing yourself to get up early to do a bunch of things that maybe don't necessarily need to be done, like if your sleep schedule is thrown off for whatever reason, you're not going to have the energy to actually want to have sex in the same way that y'all don't have energy to do a lot of the things that you're like needing to do, right? Like go to work and like drop the kids off at sports and like all of these other things. So sleep, hydration, super important. Fiber. a vast majority of people in the US are not consuming enough fiber, which means that y'all are constipated. IBS is like a huge thing. So maybe if you're not constipated, it's the other way, right? And so if you are having a lot of gut issues, you're not going to want to have, like, who wants to have sex when they're like shitting water all day or when they're super constipated, right? Like, that's not comfortable. And also, it impacts like the way that you feel, or if you're bloated, right? Like, so a lot of people with like endometriosis or PCOS, for example, tend to find themselves chronically bloated. And so, like, you're not going to want to have sex. So, really taking care of those basic, like, biological things can be super helpful. So, hydration, making sure you're eating enough fiber, focusing on like your gut health, right? Um, Making sure that you're getting enough sleep. Movement, right? I'm not saying you got to go to a CrossFit class. If you want to, by all means, but like get your body moving, because when you move your body, you are helping your body move blood, right, throughout your circulatory system. And blood has to go to the vulva in order for you to become aroused. So if it's cut off, you're not going to become aroused. And so a lot of these things in terms of like that are like impacting low libido can be addressed independent of what's going on. So I understand that a lot of people have low libido because of, physical ailments, right? So if we talk about like disabilities, if we talk about medications that you might be taking, life changes happening, menopause, right, included, all of those things definitely can impact libido. That said, there are other things that we can do to support your body, right? So it's almost like, let's use menopause as an example. You're already experiencing low libido, and then you go into menopause and you're like, oh, well, it's all menopause's fault. It's like, girl, you've been sleeping on 5 hours of sleep for the past 10 years. You never drink water. You only drink it in coffee, right? When's the last time you had some broccoli, right? Like all of those things, like it's just exacerbated. It's not just menopause. It's all of these other things.
Dang. So pretty much just make sure you're drinking water and go in the bathroom.
Yes.
Like, I feel
Even
like,
just that, because also I will say constipation also puts you in a bad mood. If you are, I mean, I've had that personal experience, but your gut health does impact your mood. And so if you're finding yourself being super moody, one, you're not going to want to have sex, but also like, even if you're not consciously thinking about that, like it's just not going to happen. Your body is worried about survival. And so procreation is like, which is like connected with sex, right? Is like the last thing on its mind.
yeah, I think like the whole house knows when I haven't gone to the bathroom in a few days. And I'm just like, don't talk to me. Like, don't hug me. Don't touch me.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and that's so true. And I think that's one thing that like we hear like, all right, drink your water. All right, you should be eating the right things. But we don't realize, and especially as we get older, we don't realize how much it impacts like our day to day,
Mm-hmm.
including like our sexual health. And it can be like, oh yeah, I roll. Like maybe in my 20s, I survived on coffee only and
Mm-hmm.
drank water occasionally. But now as we age, like it is imperative that we are taking care of ourselves. And that includes like water and feeding ourselves. Pretty much we
Mm-hmm.
have to pretend like we are plants that we are trying to keep
Yeah,
alive. I
exactly.
yeah, I feel like as you were talking, I'm just like, this is what I think about when I am trying to keep my plants alive. And it's like, okay, make sure that they have enough water and that they like that I am taking care of them and like making sure that their soil has the nutrients that they need. And it is hard. It is hard to
Mm-hmm.
keep plants alive, but I think like as much as like we want to take care of our pets and take care of our plants and take care of our kids, like we need to be making sure that we are also taking care of ourselves and feeding ourselves so that way we can get through the day and like for me like not feel bad about like getting to that point at the end of the day like okay, well, I have like taken care of myself. I am more prone to just desire like that intimacy because it's not
Mm-hmm.
always about like yeah, I desire to have intimacy with my husband, but if I'm bloated, like Don't even look at me. Like, let me go to the bathroom first.
Right. Yeah. And it's super common for women in particular to like basically put themselves last. But the problem with that is that it's twofold. So, one, when you're like, oh, well, when everybody else is taken care of, I'll take care of myself. Well, you never come because everybody always has a need. Secondly, you're not, how do I say this? You're not giving your best to everybody else if you're only giving to them. So basically they're getting your leftovers, right? And like leftovers are all right, but like, you know what I mean? Like why are you not wanting them like why are you not wanting to give them the best of you? Right? When you are well taken care of, you're less short with your husband, you're less short with your kids, right? Like you actually want to have sex. You're fun to be around, right? Like it does your kids, I don't want to say no good, but less good, we'll say. It does your kids less good if you're like being a bitch all the time because you haven't slept and like you're constipated and you're not drinking water. And I'm not saying that like we can never like have moments where we're just like not in a good mood and all of that. I'm not saying that whatsoever. However, when you are chronically under cared for, think about the way that you show up with your family, with your loved ones, right? Like at work to whatever, you don't show up as your best self. And again, not to say that we can't have bad days and we have to be at a 100% all of the time, but you're like a fraction of a human at this point because you're not cared for at all. No one is caring for you. And it is important that you make that a priority so that you can be there for your family. I have this argument with my partner all the time because he's like, "Oh, well just like give it all and like it's fine and everybody has all of me." And I'm like, "That makes no sense. You do no good." I mean, we don't have kids, right? But like in this hypothetical scenario, I'm like, "You do no good to me and your hypothetical children if you are dead." Like we want you around. We don't give a shit how much you're working and all of this stuff. Like that doesn't matter. We want you around, so you need to take care of yourself.
I just love that reframing. Like we need you alive and healthy in order for like everything to fall into place and to work smoothly. Um, and that starts with taking care of ourselves. With this conversation, I feel like a lot more millennials are open to having conversations like this, but it wasn't modeled to us from the previous generation. And as I'm raising kids, but whether you have kids or have nieces and nephews or have some influence on the next generation, like how do we even start having that conversation and provide that safety and environment for education for the next generation when we're still kind of like learning all of this ourselves and learning to be comfortable, like even just having these conversations and exploring that within ourselves, in our own body, like our own pleasure, and having that conversation with our partners. Like it's just a lot to like think about when we're in the thick of it and learning how can we be that model or encouragement to the next generation so that they don't end up where we are now.
Yeah. So I think that the best educators are the educators that are willing to acknowledge that they don't know everything and that is okay. And the lifelong learners, right? Like I'm still learning. There are things that I don't know and really sharing that. I also think there's a lot to say for sharing your experience with your children or young people in your life that there are things that you don't know and like that and also because like your experience in the sense of like I wasn't taught this, right? This is how information was shared with me. This is how I found this information, like all of that, and sharing your experience and why it is you know what you know and why it is you don't know that you don't know, right? And not from a place of like, well, I have to justify why I don't know this, but really sharing your experience in the same way that you might with a friend of like, oh yeah, like my parents never talked to me about this, you know, this and that. And you can really just share with kids or young people in your life about what it is that you're learning, right? And you don't have to go into explicit detail if you don't want to, right? Depending on the person and the appropriateness of the conversation, but you can share what it is that you're learning. And I think the best thing that we can do for the young people in our lives is really being a place where they can ask questions. And so you can start that curiosity in them by asking them questions, and not like from a place of like, what is this body part called? Right? But really by asking, like, what are your thoughts on this? Do you know what this is? Right? What comes up when you think of this topic, right? And really just asking them questions and engaging them in curiosity to see where they're at, particularly as they're like older, right? Because I mean, curiosity is great at all points in life, but if you are in a place where you haven't really talked to your kids about sex, or you've only talked about it like a little bit to a certain extent, I'm going to guess, and I'm 99% certain that I'm correct, that they've already heard about it from somewhere. So they already have some concept of what sex is and what it's for and like all of those things. And so you really want to start that conversation by, where are we starting from? Is there misinformation that I need to correct? Is there information that I actually don't know, but I don't think that's right? Let's look it up together, right? And really finding out, where are you starting from first? And then in terms of like little ones, it's really just starting out with basic knowledge about your body. And maybe you don't know the names of your body parts, and that's okay. They don't need to know that. You can learn at the same time as they can, right? And really naming them and using the actual terms of the body. I understand that it can be awkward to have conversations with your kids, young ones, even your partner about sex. But it does get easier the more that you do it. The reason why it feels so awkward and embarrassing now is because you don't do it. And then your brain builds up this huge story about what it's going to mean like when you do it, what it's going to be like, and all of this stuff. It's like the example that I always give my clients is like, when you're going to go and jump in a pool, and if you just jump in, it's fine, even if the water is cold. But if you're sitting there like dipping your toe in the water and like just standing there, like it almost gets colder as you wait to do it. So if you just do it, if you just rip off the Band-Aid and like dive in, I'm mixing like two analogies here, but like you just like dive in and just have those conversations, the more that you do it, the less awkward it's going to be. It might always be awkward, and that's okay. You're going to build the skill of feeling awkward and having those conversations.
I am definitely, and it takes me 30 minutes to get into the pool, and my kids cannot stand it. They're just like, just jump in. And I think that is a great analogy. It is a difference between, um, like the generations. I think a lot of us are, when we're having these sensitive conversations, or like conversations that we feel are sensitive, we build it up in our heads so much, especially like coupled with like our Latina backgrounds, coupled with like if we were part of um, an institution that was very strict on sex, like all of that, like internally with ourselves, like can be like feel like such a grand thing. But then once we have that conversation, I remember when I first had the conversation and explained sex to my kids, I was like building it up, and I just like, all right, it's time, I need to just get it out there. And it wasn't that big a deal. Like they were just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay. And they were
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay. And I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, okay. It's fine. And so I think a lot of that insecurity is just like internal. And like once it's had, like it's not that big a deal. And then, like you said, it just gets easier with time. So I love like that advice. Yeah, I feel like with this conversation of sex and sexual health, like it can just feel overwhelming. But then, like, the more we talk about it, the more we're conversing within just like our amigas. Like, it's not as grand or as heavy or as like overwhelming as we may have painted it in our heads. So yeah, I just appreciate that. So I will forever continue inviting you to be a speaker and a panelist because I just remember, like I said, that first time, and even like this last panel, people are just so curious about like how do we keep that spark? How do we learn about that, like ourselves? And I feel like those are the most questions that have been asked. Um, and so I'd love for you to like talk about some myths that you've learned along the way to get us like thinking about like the next steps in our personal lives as we think about our own sexual pleasures. Do you have like one or two myths that you can like bust open like right now and say like, okay, it's not that bad?
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is like there's this idea that our partners should know what we want. And that's absolutely not true. And I think this goes, I typically talk about this in terms of like my clientele who are typically women, but I think this is across the board. We're under the impression that each sex, like one that buys into like this sexual binary, right? Which is, that's a whole other conversation. But there's this idea that like men like one thing and women like this other thing, right? And there's no in between. And so therefore your partner should know, well, women like this. And that's absolutely not true. And we know this is true because sex is just a form of pleasure. So I might like tacos a certain way, but you might like tacos a different way, and someone else might not like tacos at all, right? So like the idea that everybody likes the same thing is absolutely not true. And so when you are exploring a new partner for the first time, it's really important to have that open dialogue about like what their likes are, what their dislikes are, right? Like having that open conversation. And as people change, if you are in a long-term partnership, right, it's things change as well, right? Like I might like something today and not like it 2 days from now or 2 years from now. Or maybe it's not even that I don't like it. It's just like I'm not interested in that today. Going back to the taco example, I like tacos, but maybe I don't want it today because I had them yesterday and now today I want pizza, right? Like it, our likes change, our preferences, our likes, or what it is, our desires can change from moment to moment. And so it's really important to have that open dialogue. And it's not true that everybody likes the same thing. That is absolutely not true. The second thing is that orgasm is like this pinnacle of pleasure, right? It's like the thing that we're all after. And I'm all for orgasms. Like I teach my clients how to have them and how to have them repeatedly. I think that that is super, it's a super important thing to have in your artillery belt, right? But it's not the only thing. That's not really what we're after when it comes to sex. When it comes to sex, we're actually after pleasure, and orgasm is a part of that. And so I talk in analogies. So pleasure to me is just essentially like you're enjoying something. So I can enjoy sex in the same way that I enjoy tacos. And everybody is like, no, that's not the same thing. The way that you experience it is a little bit different, but pleasure is pleasure independent of the act. You can experience pleasure in various ways in your life. And when you are approaching sex of like, oh, well, the whole point of this is to have an orgasm, that's usually where you fall short. You can have amazing sex sessions and not have an orgasm. And also, when you put your pressure on yourself or on your partner to experience orgasm, that's you're putting too much pressure on yourself and you're likely not going to orgasm. And I'll share like a third bonus one because I think it's super important, and it just made me, this conversation just made me think of this, is that like pleasure is not your partner's responsibility. So in the same way that that your partner shouldn't necessarily know what you want, it's also not their responsibility for you to experience pleasure. It is your responsibility because you are in control of that. And the reason why we know this is true is because there have been times that we'll just talk about in the bedroom for a second that you've had amazing sex with your partner. There are other times that you've had the same exact sex and it was not good. It's not the partner. It's essentially like the attitude that you come into it with, right? And when you can learn to control your pleasure and understand that it's in your control, then you are able to turn that on whenever you want. And again, using analogies, like presumably love your partner if you're with them and you enjoy having time with them. And sometimes when you're in a really bad mood, you want to like slap them in the face or like get out of my face, right? Like do not disturb. And it's not because of them, it's because of the space that you're coming up to it with. And this isn't from a place of blame, it's really from a place of understanding that you are in control of the pleasure that you experience at any given time. And when you can really take responsibility for that and ownership of that, sex becomes so much more mind blowing because you are in control of that. You don't have to rely on anyone else to do it for you.
I love your analogies, by the way.
Thanks.
I totally relate to food analogies, especially.
We love to eat.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This conversation has been amazing. Where can people connect with you, find you on the internet, and work with you?
Yeah, for sure. So you can go to my website, sexinspanglish.com. So it's Spanglish, not Spanish. You can find me Sex and Spanglish anywhere, essentially. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on all the places. I also have a podcast called Sex and Spanglish. So you can find me there. That's wherever you listen to podcasts. And in order to work with me, you can access it in the link in my bio, or you can go to my website. It's right there. I'm currently taking on one-on-one clients. So if you're ready to learn how to have mind-blowing sex on demand, independent of what your partner does, then let's talk.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation. I loved every second of it. I am excited for my audience to listen. And yeah, I feel like this conversation needs to continue to build, and let's keep talking about it, because there's no reason we need to be embarrassed or ashamed. It's just education, and we deserve to feel good and have pleasure too. So
yeah.
All right, well, thank you. I'm sure I'll see you. We do a lot of collaborating and see each other at events. So yeah, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
I'm so glad we finally got to have Ana on the podcast. I just love her calm and chill vibe. Okay, amigas, thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review this podcast so we can get more ears listening to these stories and can continue elevating la cultura. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening. Y nos vemos next week. Bye.